I think the significance of the studio was generally as a template for how a lot of studios were organized later on. The sort of tailorization of the workplace, the assembly line approach to making animated cartoons.
There's a division of labor, unlike Winsor McCay or J. Stewart Blackton, where they did the films themselves completely, maybe with one assistant or so. Bray was set up to mass produce animation.
McCay's process was very labor-intensive. The drawings were quite detailed, and his assistant had to draw over and over again on each of these drawings the background.
Well, registration is important because the animator has to make sure that when he draws it, the character isn't moving where it shouldn't be. When it's photographed, it has to always be in exactly the same position. Otherwise, you'll have things flickering around like this. McCay was also using what he learned in the newspaper business. They would have crosshairs on the edge of the artwork, and then they could just position it. So they would take the drawings with crosshairs on them, paste it on these cards, and then fit it in over and over, as many thousands of drawings that they had.
One of the innovations for McCay was what he called the split system. He would make storytelling poses, main poses of his animation, and then fill in the in-between drawings after that. So that was the production pipeline. He would do the main drawings, he would do the in-betweens, and then Fitzsimmons would come along and fit the background in around it.
They had to trace the drawing of the background on every figure. 5 drawings, 5,000 drawings. So that was very tedious, but that was the only way they thought at the time they could do it. The interesting thing is, he took such an intricate, detailed background that just must have made life miserable for the assistant who had to do that.
When you see it on the screen, it's amazing how it doesn't shimmer that much, but it does shimmer, and McCay was happy with that because he said, it's like the breeze going through the trees here and maybe the sun shining off of the rocks, etc., etc.
The thing you have to know is no matter how careful you trace something, it's not going to be perfect. But McCay was probably thought, since he was the guy who could draw all the time, he just assumed, we can't do it any other way, let's just draw it. Today, that would drive all the producers crazy.
He had the patience and he had the ability to do identical images with a slight difference on an industrial scale, which very few people could do.
Earl Hurd was a very talented cartoonist and animator.
He began making animated cartoons for Universal. Bray had undoubtedly seen these things, and I believe he must have noticed some interesting techniques being used in them.
The idea of putting everything on cells saved work.
When Hurd came to the Bray studio, they were still producing films in the artist's dream manner, where a background was reproduced as a photostat with a small hole where the animation was to go and the background was to be retraced in that area.
Hurd devised a system of using transparent sheets of celluloid to draw and paint artwork on.
The background is put over the drawings. It looks like it's behind it, but it's actually over it. And then you have to remove this, change the drawing, and put the background back. So it was always registered. It was always in the right place, and it wouldn't move. And eventually, somebody got the idea, well, we put the background down and then put the character over the background.
That way they could put the moving characters under the camera on top of a static background that could be very elaborately painted and drawn.
It really enabled the animation industry to move forward, and it was a technique that was used for many, many decades afterwards until computers came along.